The training range was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of wind sweeping across the vast expanse of sand and dirt, carrying with it the faint metallic tang of spent casings and gun oil. The morning sun had only just begun to crest over the horizon, bathing everything in a golden haze, and yet the tension in the air was already thick. Recruit Nadia Vale stood at her lane, rifle slung, her breathing measured but shallow. The smell of cordite still lingered from the previous round of drills, but she didn't pay it much mind. Her eyes were fixed on the silhouette targets lined up at varying distances, 50, 100, 200 meters. They stood there like silent judges, waiting. Across from her, Sergeant Cross leaned against a barricade with his arms crossed, his jaw tight with impatience. His shadow stretched long and thin in the morning light. "You're too slow," he said flatly, his voice carrying across the dusty field with a sharpness that made her flinch even though she'd been expecting it. "This isn't a dance recital, Vale. The only rhythm you need to worry about is how fast you can eliminate threats before they eliminate you." His words stung, but not because they were unfair. She had been slow during the last round, too slow to impress anyone on the squad, much less Cross. She'd been fast enough to pass the basic qualification weeks ago, but Cross wasn't training her for basic anymore. This was advanced combat marksmanship training, and here, passing wasn't good enough. Here, you either dominated or you didn't belong. Nadia's hands flexed against the grip of her rifle, her knuckles pale beneath fingerless gloves. She wanted to snap back, wanted to tell him that she was trying, that she wasn't built like the others, that her reflexes weren't as raw or her arms as steady, but none of those excuses would do her any favors. So she just nodded, a curt, silent nod that made Cross's lips twitch in irritation. He stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel, his voice low but pointed. "Trying doesn't keep you alive out there. Speed and precision do. You're smart, Vale. You've got a good head for tactics, but if you can't move faster than your enemy's trigger finger, you're a body bag waiting to happen." His tone was harsh, but there was no malice in it. That was almost worse. Cross wasn't belittling her because he hated her, he was pushing her because he saw something she hadn't yet proven. She forced herself to breathe deeply, to keep her emotions buried beneath the calm surface she'd spent months perfecting. "Understood, Sergeant," she said evenly, voice steady despite the tightening in her chest. Cross gave her a curt nod and motioned to the assistant instructor near the control booth. "Reset the targets. Randomize sequence." The other instructor tapped at the console, and Nadia watched as the steel targets in front of her lowered into the dirt before popping back up at different intervals and distances. 5 in total. She knew the drill. She'd done this scenario twice already today, both times failing to meet the brutal time requirement of 3 seconds per target. Now Cross wanted her to try again. She squared her stance, feeling the slight give of the gravel under her boots. She checked the chamber of her carbine, finger grazing the cool steel of the bolt before she flicked the safety back on. She didn't need to check it, she just needed to feel the movement, the familiarity of the weapon. Her rifle wasn't just a tool, it was her lifeline. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drumbeat she couldn't quiet. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders heavier than her gear ever could. She rolled her neck, adjusted her grip, and tried to picture herself not on a sterile range but in a real firefight, enemies moving, the chaos of combat swirling around her. Because this was training, yes, but Cross's words echoed in her mind, this was about survival. "Shooter ready?" Cross barked. Nadia inhaled sharply through her nose, feeling her lungs expand against the snug tactical vest strapped across her torso. "Ready," she said. The word was calm, but she was anything but. She tightened her grip, finger resting along the trigger guard. Cross raised his hand, fingers poised over the remote trigger for the buzzer. She could feel every second stretching, every moment elongating into something unbearable, and then the shrill beep split the air. Time slowed. The first target popped up at 50 meters, a gray silhouette against the brightening sky. Nadia's rifle was already up, stock snug against her shoulder, sights lined up with practiced efficiency. The reticle hovered over center mass, and she squeezed, not jerked, the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder with a satisfying thump. She didn't even wait to see the steel plate drop, she was already shifting, pivoting, her body twisting as the second target appeared farther out. Her breathing slowed, her mind narrowing into a tunnel where nothing existed but movement and reaction. She squeezed again, the sound of another clean hit ringing out. The third popped at an awkward angle to her right. She pivoted hard, felt gravel shift beneath her boots, but she didn't falter. The rifle was steady in her hands now, her earlier hesitation melting into muscle memory. Another squeeze, another hit. She was fast faster than she'd ever been in training, and some part of her knew it. She could hear Cross shouting something, but it was drowned out by the roar of her pulse in her ears. The fourth and fifth targets popped almost simultaneously, one far left, one dead center at a longer distance. A flash of calculation shot through her mind. She snapped to the closer one first, fired, felt the recoil, then immediately swung back for the long shot, lining up her sights with surgical precision. She exhaled, a sharp breath through her teeth, and pulled the trigger. The last plate clanged, ringing out like a bell tolling victory. The silence that followed was deafening. Nadia's chest heaved as she lowered her weapon, the acrid smell of gunpowder clinging to her nostrils. 5 shots. 5 hits. She glanced up at the scoreboard, heart hammering so hard she could barely see straight. Time, 7.3 seconds. She blinked. That couldn't be right. Cross stalked over, his face unreadable. He snatched the range timer from the other instructor, glanced at it, then looked back at her with an expression that was neither pride nor anger but something far more complex. 7.3 seconds, he repeated, his voice low but carrying weight. He gestured at the targets. That's impressive. Nadia's arms trembled slightly as the adrenaline coursed through her veins, but she forced herself to stand tall. Cross circled her like a predator assessing prey, his eyes sharp. Again, he said suddenly, making her heart drop. She thought he'd praise her, maybe even let her rest, but of course not. This wasn't about one good run, this was about consistency. About proving she wasn't a fluke. Nadia didn't hesitate. She reset her stance, checked her weapon, and nodded. Ready. Cross hit the buzzer, and the world narrowed to the familiar blur of movement and sound once again. The training range was quiet except for the whisper of wind sweeping across the open desert expanse, carrying the faint metallic tang of spent brass and gun oil. Early sunlight bathed the field in a harsh golden glow, highlighting every scuff on the gravel, every glint from the targets lined in the distance. Recruit Nadia Vale stood motionless at her firing lane, boots planted firmly. Rifle slung low across her chest, eyes locked on the silhouettes at 50, 100, and 200 meters. The silence before a drill always felt suffocating, but today, under Sergeant Cross's watchful eye, it felt heavier than body armor. You're too slow, Cross said flatly, arms crossed, leaning against a barricade like a man carved from stone. His voice carried easily over the range, clipped and sharp. You think your enemy's gonna wait while you line up the perfect shot? No. They're already pulling the trigger while you're still breathing in. The sting of his words wasn't new, but it was no less brutal. Nadia's jaw tightened. She'd been slow last round, too slow to impress him or anyone else. Cross wasn't training her for basic anymore. She'd passed that weeks ago. This was advanced marksmanship training, the kind reserved for those who were expected to lead in combat, not just survive it. Here, passing wasn't enough, you had to dominate. She flexed her fingers against the grip of her rifle, knuckles pale beneath fingerless gloves. Words rose to her lips, excuses, apologies, something, but she swallowed them all. Excuses had no place here. Cross had no patience for them, and she had none for herself. She simply gave a tight nod, keeping her expression neutral. Cross's shadow stretched across the dirt as he pushed off the barricade and strode toward her, his boots crunching against gravel. He stopped close enough that she could see the sun glint off the scar on his jaw, a thin reminder of some firefight he never spoke about. Trying doesn't cut it, he said, voice low, measured. Speed and precision keep you alive. That's it. I don't care if you're tired, Vale. I don't care if your hands shake. You need to be faster than their trigger finger, or you're dead weight. Got it? Yes, Sergeant, she said, voice steady despite the tension wound tight in her chest. Cross stared at her for a beat, unreadable, then jerked his chin toward the control booth. Reset the sequence. The assistant instructor tapped the console, and Nadia watched the 5 steel silhouettes dip below the berm, only to rise again at random intervals and distances. The sun was climbing now, burning off the last of the morning haze, but it didn't matter. Her world narrowed to those 5 plates. She checked the chamber of her carbine out of habit, ran a gloved hand over the receiver, then flicked the safety back on. Her rifle was more than a weapon, it was an extension of her will. Shooter ready? Cross barked. Nadia rolled her shoulders back, steadied her breathing, and nodded once. Ready. Cross raised his hand, fingers poised over the remote for the buzzer. The seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last, until the shrill beep split the air. The first target popped up at 50 meters, a gray silhouette against the bright sky. Her rifle snapped to her shoulder, sight picture aligned in an instant. She exhaled and squeezed, not jerked, the trigger. The shot rang out, and the steel plate clanged as it fell. She was already pivoting, shifting weight, tracking the second target at 100 meters. Her finger stroked the trigger again, smooth, controlled. Another clang. The third target appeared suddenly to her right at a sharp angle. She pivoted hard, boots skidding slightly on gravel, but she adjusted without hesitation. Her sight hovered over the silhouette's chest, breath paused, shot clean. The recoil thumped against her shoulder, but her focus didn't waver. Her body moved faster now, running purely on drilled muscle memory. The fourth and fifth targets popped almost simultaneously, one far left, one dead center at maximum distance. She prioritized instantly, swinging left first, firing clean, then snapping back for the far shot. She steadied her breath, exhaled through her teeth, and squeezed. The last plate rang out with a metallic clang that echoed across the empty range. The silence that followed was deafening. Her chest heaved as she lowered her rifle, the acrid scent of gunpowder thick in the air. 5 rounds. 5 hits. She glanced at the timer, her heart pounding. 7.3 seconds. She blinked, doubting her eyes. That couldn't be right. Cross strode forward, expression unreadable, and snatched the timer from the other instructor. He glanced at it, then at her. 7.3 seconds, he repeated, voice even. He looked back at the fallen silhouettes, then at her again. There was no smile, but there was something in his gaze she hadn't seen before, respect. Not bad, he said finally, and that alone felt like a medal. Nadia forced herself to stand tall, though her arms trembled slightly from adrenaline. Her breathing slowed, and she adjusted her grip on the rifle, forcing the tremor out of her hands. Cross circled her slowly, studying her like a hawk. Again, he ordered. Her relief evaporated instantly. She had thought, hoped, he might give her a break, maybe even acknowledge the progress. But of course not. This wasn't about one good run. Anyone could have a lucky streak. Cross wanted proof, and proof meant consistency. She squared her shoulders and nodded. Yes, Sergeant. Cross motioned to reset the drill. The target sank, then rose again in a fresh randomized sequence. Nadia cycled her bolt, checked her ammo count, and stepped back into position. Her muscles were already tired, but adrenaline sharpened her senses. The sun was fully above the horizon now, casting harsh shadows across the range, and her gear felt heavier than ever. Still, she didn't let it shake her. Shooter ready? Cross asked. She drew in a slow breath, exhaled, and said firmly, ready. The buzzer screamed again, and everything else faded. The first target appeared, and she was already moving, rifle up, sights aligned. Shot fired. Clang. She pivoted fast, tracking the next silhouette, fired, hit. Her mind was a blur, her body running on instinct. Gravel shifted underfoot, gear clinked against her vest, but nothing broke her rhythm. The third and fourth targets fell just as quickly. When the last one appeared at maximum range, she paused just long enough to steady her aim, breath slow and deliberate. The reticle hovered, then she squeezed. Clang. The range went silent again, the echo of steel on steel fading into the wind. Cross checked the timer. 6.9 seconds. Something in his expression softened for just a moment, a flicker of satisfaction that passed too quickly to be sure. Better, he said simply. We'll run it again. Nadia nodded, sweat dripping down her brow, but her stance remained firm. She wasn't here for compliments. She was here to prove she wasn't too slow. The targets reset again, the whir of the mechanism blending with the dry whistle of wind rushing over the hills. Nadia rolled her shoulders, loosening tight muscles, and recentered herself. She could feel Cross watching her, his gaze heavy with both expectation and calculation. There was no encouragement, no reassurance, only the weight of his silence pressing her to be sharper, faster. She could almost hear her own heartbeat echoing inside her helmet, steady but quick, like a metronome pushing her forward. Shooter ready? She gave a single nod. Ready. The buzzer screamed, and she exploded into motion. The first plate dropped with a crack, the second followed in less than a breath. She moved like water, flowing between targets, each shot punctuating the air with mechanical precision. 3, 4, 5, done. Her breathing was controlled, her trigger work clean, her stance unbroken. Cross-checked the time. 6.6 seconds. Again, he ordered, voice like gravel. She didn't hesitate. Reset. Buzzer. Fire. She shot faster this time, trusting her training instead of overthinking. Her eyes snapped from target to target, her rifle rising and falling in perfect synchronization with her breath. When the last plate fell, the timer read 6.4 seconds. For the first time, Cross allowed himself a brief grunt of approval. Not bad. Let's see if you can hold it. They ran the drill again. And again. And again. Nadia's arms screamed with strain, her shoulders burned, her gloves were slick with sweat, but she didn't stop. Each sequence blurred into the next, until the sound of the buzzer felt like a starting gun in her bloodstream, jolting her body into motion before thought could catch up. She was moving on instinct now, faster than she ever thought possible. 6.3. 6.1. 6.0. The numbers dropped steadily, but Cross never changed his expression. To him, there was no finish line. Every improvement was just proof that she could go further. Nadia grit her teeth, refusing to let exhaustion slow her. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts, sweat trickled down her neck, and her muscles trembled violently. But her hands never faltered, her aim never wavered. After what felt like hours, Cross finally called a halt. She lowered her rifle, chest heaving, hands trembling from adrenaline and fatigue. The sun was higher now, baking the range in relentless heat, but she didn't care. The adrenaline was a fire in her veins, driving her past exhaustion. Cross walked over, boots crunching in the gravel. He studied her for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable, then finally said, "Better. But I don't care about numbers if you can't deliver under pressure." She blinked, confused. "Pressure?" He gestured to the assistant instructor. "Set up the moving targets. Randomize movement speed. And add auditory distractions." Nadia felt her stomach tighten. Moving targets were one thing. Distractions were another. She'd seen this drill break more seasoned shooters than her. The system would blast sirens, gunfire sounds, even screams while she shot, simulating combat chaos. Cross leaned close, voice low. "Speed is useless if you freeze under stress. This drill separates soldiers from survivors." She swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." The range shifted as the targets were replaced with mechanical silhouettes mounted on tracks, each capable of darting unpredictably left or right. Speakers hidden across the berm crackled to life, testing their range of noises. Nadia tightened the strap on her vest, adjusted her gloves, and forced her breathing to slow. "Shooter ready?" "Ready," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The buzzer blared, and chaos erupted. Sirens wailed, bursts of gunfire cracked from speakers, and metal silhouettes darted across the field. Nadia moved instinctively, her rifle snapping up, tracking the first target's erratic movement. She fired. Clang. She pivoted to the next, compensating for its sudden lurch to the left. Another shot, another hit. The third target moved faster, jerking unpredictably, and she felt a flicker of frustration, but she forced it down. Breathe. Move. Fire. Clang. Two left. The noise was deafening now, gunfire, shouting, alarms. Sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't blink. The fourth fell. She swung fast for the last, lined up, and squeezed. Clang. Silence returned. Cross-checked the timer, 8.4 seconds. She cursed under her breath. Slower than before. Cross didn't scold her. He simply said, "Again." They ran it 3 more times. 7.9, 7.6. 7.2. With each run, her focus sharpened. The chaos became background noise. She wasn't thinking about speed anymore, she was flowing. Moving. Shooting. Breathing. When she finished the 4th run, the timer flashed 6.8 seconds. Cross finally nodded, a small sign of approval. "That's more like it." Nadia allowed herself a single deep breath of satisfaction before resetting for the next round. She wasn't just keeping up anymore, she was getting faster under chaos. "Good," Cross said, voice even but with a trace of pride. "Now let's make it interesting." He raised his voice to the assistant. "Double the targets. Add pop-ups." Nadia felt her stomach clench again. This wasn't training anymore. This was a test of survival. The range transformed in minutes. Extra rails were activated, doubling the number of moving targets. The system's hydraulics hissed and clicked as pop-up silhouettes were loaded into place at random intervals, some programmed to appear for less than a second before vanishing again. The assistant instructor keyed in commands, and the speakers crackled ominously, ready to pump out an even more chaotic barrage of noise. Nadia adjusted her stance, her hands resting on her rifle, every nerve in her body on edge. Cross watched her with arms folded, his eyes narrowed, his jaw set in that perpetual look of someone who had seen too many firefights to be impressed by anything. "This is no longer about time," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the whir of machinery. "It's about survival. Hit every target, no matter what. You miss one, you fail." Nadia's heart thudded against her ribs like a war drum. She had been exhausted before, but this new drill pushed her nerves to the breaking point. There would be no rhythm to memorize, no predictable sequence. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to block out her fatigue. She adjusted the sling across her torso and flexed her fingers, the familiar weight of her rifle grounding her. Cross tilted his head. "You ready, Vale?" She nodded, jaw tight. "Ready." The buzzer screamed, and chaos exploded. All at once, alarms blared, bursts of gunfire cracked from hidden speakers, and shouted commands echoed like a battlefield. Silhouettes popped up and zipped across the range unpredictably, some darting to the left, some jerking right, others flickering into sight for half a heartbeat before dropping again. Her rifle was already up, tracking the first target as it sped across the rails. She squeezed off a clean shot, dropped it, then pivoted sharply to nail a pop-up that had appeared just a few yards to her left. The noise was deafening, but she tuned it out, letting her training take over. Clang. Clang. Another clang. She moved like she'd been doing this for years, her stance fluid but firm, her arms moving independently of her lower body. Sweat burned her eyes, but she didn't blink. She shot fast, but never rushed. Every pull of the trigger was controlled, deliberate. 2 more targets appeared, one high on the left, one low on the far right. She prioritized instantly, swinging her rifle up, firing, adjusting, firing again. Both plates fell. She reloaded without looking, the motion so smooth it barely registered. The drill went on for what felt like an eternity, her body in constant motion. The pop-ups were relentless, and the moving silhouette sped up with every passing second. Nadia's arms ached, her shoulders screamed, and her thighs trembled from the constant pivots and stutter steps. Yet she didn't falter. Clang. 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 The final target appeared without warning, a pop-up right at the edge of her vision. She swung fast, sight locked, and squeezed. Clang. The range went silent. Every silhouette had been hit. Every pop-up had fallen. Nadia's chest heaved as she lowered her rifle, gasping for breath, her face slick with sweat. She glanced at the timer out of habit. 11.1 seconds. Slow by previous standards, but she had hit everything. No misses. Cross strode forward, arms still folded, but there was something different about his posture. A faint glimmer of approval in his hard eyes. "Not bad," he said, his voice calm but carrying weight. "You passed." Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. Cross didn't let up. "Again?" he said. Her head snapped up, disbelief flashing in her eyes. "Sir. You think one perfect run proves anything? You could have gotten lucky. We do it again." Nadia bit back frustration and simply nodded, resetting her rifle. The assistants reset the targets, adding even more pop-ups this time. The mechanical whir of the system felt louder than before, almost mocking. She dropped into position, rifle raised. "Ready." The buzzer screamed. Chaos erupted again. This time, the system was even faster. Targets shot across the rails like ghosts, disappearing and reappearing at impossible angles. The speakers blasted screams and explosions so loud they rattled her teeth. It was a simulation designed to overwhelm the mind, to trigger panic. But Nadia didn't panic. She moved even faster, rifle snapping from one silhouette to the next like a predator's gaze. Clang. Clang. Reload. Clang. Pivot. Drop low. Clang. Her movements were sharp and efficient, and though her muscles screamed in protest, she didn't let exhaustion slow her. She felt herself slipping into a state beyond thought, a flow where she wasn't counting targets or calculating angles. She was reacting, her body working faster than conscious thought. Pop up, drop. Moving target, swing, fire. 2 quick pivots, reload, fire. The drill ended with a final clang, and she dropped her rifle slightly, panting hard, sweat dripping down her nose. 10.5 seconds. All hits. Cross raised an eyebrow, almost impressed. Again. She gritted her teeth, slung the rifle, and nodded. The assistants reset the course yet again. The third run was brutal. They added even more distractions, turning the simulation into something closer to a firefight than a training exercise. Targets popped up behind cover, some moving faster than she'd ever seen before. Sirens blared louder, explosions crackled from speakers, and a fog machine added haze to simulate smoke. But even with the chaos, she didn't falter. Her shots were precise, her reloads automatic, her breathing controlled. Every movement she made was deliberate, every target fell in rapid succession. When the drill ended, Cross glanced at the timer. 9.8 seconds. All hits. For the first time, his mouth curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Not bad at all, Vale. Looks like you're finally waking up. Nadia allowed herself a single nod. Her arms trembled violently, her shoulders ached, and her chest burned, but she stood tall. She wasn't here for praise. She was here to prove she could do this. Cross circled her slowly, studying her like a sculptor inspecting his work. Not many recruits make it this far, he said, voice low. Most of them break under this drill. But you're starting to look like a shooter. She didn't respond. Words felt unnecessary. Again, he said finally, his voice dropping to a growl. This time, no mistakes. I don't care how fast. I care that every single one of those targets falls the moment it shows itself. Nadia nodded, pulling back the charging handle of her rifle. Her exhaustion didn't matter anymore. The world narrowed to her rifle, the targets, and the sound of that buzzer. The assistants reset everything. The target stood ready, the speakers hummed, and the range smelled of oil and gunpowder. Nadia closed her eyes for a second, inhaling slowly, steadying her pulse. She opened them again, gaze sharp. Shooter ready? Cross barked. She exhaled sharply through her nose. Ready. The buzzer screamed. Chaos. She was already moving, rifle snapping to the first target, dropping it instantly. Her arms felt lighter now, her aim sharper. Every pop-up fell as soon as it appeared, every moving silhouette clanged before it had a chance to change direction. Her mind was calm, focused, each breath timed perfectly to every trigger pull. Clang. 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 The last target popped at the far edge of the range. She swung, steadied, squeezed. Clang. The silence afterward was deafening. Cross-checked the timer. 9.1 seconds. All hits. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once, a rare show of respect. That's how you survive a fight. Nadia lowered her rifle, her arms trembling, but her posture proud. She was no longer the too slow recruit. Something inside her had shifted. The sun was high and merciless now, beating down on the range with a heat that shimmered off the gravel like waves. Nadia's uniform clung to her skin, damp with sweat, and her arms trembled faintly from hours of drills. She stood in silence as Cross inspected her weapon, checking the chamber, the optics, even the magazine seating, before handing it back without a word. The other instructors were moving quickly, resetting targets, adjusting rail systems, and hauling equipment onto the field. There was a different kind of energy in the air, no more methodical repetition, no more predictable training patterns. This felt like preparation for something heavier. Cross finally broke the silence. Vale, he said, voice calm but carrying weight, you've passed every drill I've thrown at you today. You've hit your targets, kept your composure, and shaved 3 seconds off your time. That's good. He took a step closer, his shadow cutting across her boots. But good doesn't keep you alive in a fight. Good gets you killed. You're not leaving this range until you prove you're not just fast, you're lethal under pressure. Nadia adjusted her sling, tightening it across her vest. Yes, Sergeant. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Cross gestured toward the far end of the range. The assistants were assembling barriers, overturned barrels, and abandoned vehicle husks, pieces of cover forming a small mock urban environment. Speakers were being repositioned to surround the area, and smoke canisters were being stacked in neat rows along the edge. This wasn't going to be a simple test. This was a simulation. You're going into that kill house, Cross said, his tone matter-of-fact, as though he was giving her instructions on folding laundry. Targets will be live, moving, and some will be hostile silhouettes. Others will be civilians. You'll have no idea which until you're close enough to identify them. You miss a hostile, you fail. You shoot a civilian, you fail. And you'll be under constant fire. You hesitate, you're dead. Clear? Yes, Sergeant, she said again, this time with even more conviction. Cross studied her for a moment, then handed her 2 extra magazines. Load up. You get 40 rounds. Make them count. She nodded, quickly swapping mags and securing the spares in her vest. Her heart thumped steadily, but there was no fear anymore, only focus. The drills had stripped away hesitation, leaving behind sharp instinct. The assistants triggered the fog machines, and smoke began to creep across the range, swirling in the hot wind and clinging to the mock buildings. Sirens wailed, gunfire echoed from hidden speakers, and shouting filled the air. The simulated battlefield came alive. Cross leaned in close, his voice low but sharp. "Remember, Vale, speed is nothing without precision. You're no good to anyone if you're fast but sloppy. Slow down only enough to stay lethal. Trust your instincts." She gave him a sharp nod. "Understood. Go." The buzzer shrieked, and she sprinted forward, rifle raised. The world turned into chaos. Smoke stung her eyes, and the air was filled with the deafening sound of gunfire and screams. She ducked behind a barrel as a moving silhouette zipped across her field of view. Hostile. She tracked it smoothly, sight picture clear, and fired. Clang. She pushed forward, stepping over a concrete barrier, her weapon sweeping in smooth arcs. 2 more targets appeared, one crouched low, the other standing tall. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, identifying. Civilian. Hostile. She fired, the standing silhouette clanging as it fell, while the crouched target stayed upright. More noise. A burst of simulated gunfire erupted from the speakers to her left, and she instinctively dropped to a knee, swinging her rifle to track movement. Another hostile popped up from behind a stack of crates. She fired twice, dropping it, then quickly rolled behind cover as 2 more silhouettes zipped across the far end of the lane. Her breathing was sharp but controlled. She rose from cover, took a step forward, and dropped the first target with a single shot. The second moved erratically, darting side to side, but she timed her breath and squeezed. Clang. The simulation ramped up. Smoke thickened, and the speakers blasted explosions so loud the ground vibrated beneath her boots. She pushed forward through the haze, rifle steady. A civilian target popped up directly in front of her, making her instinctively pause. She sidestepped, scanning for threats, and sure enough, a hostile silhouette appeared behind the civilian cutout. She shifted, leaned out, and fired a clean shot. Her rifle was almost empty. She ducked behind a burnt-out car frame, ejecting the spent magazine and slamming in a fresh one without looking. The motion was fluid, instinctual, the result of hundreds of hours of repetition. She advanced deeper into the mock-urban setup, weaving between barriers, eyes sharp. The smoke made it hard to see, but she trusted her training. Movement flickered in her periphery. She turned, spotted a hostile darting between 2 barrels, and dropped it instantly. Another appeared on her right, closer this time. She swung, fired, hit. The sound of simulated gunfire was relentless, but it no longer rattled her. Her pulse was steady now, her breathing measured. She felt as if she'd been transported back into that flow state from earlier drills. A sudden burst of movement caught her attention, a hostile popping up behind cover directly ahead. She fired. Clang. Another target appeared to her left. Clang. The path narrowed, forcing her into a makeshift alley between stacked shipping crates. She crouched low, sweeping her rifle. 2 silhouettes appeared at the far end, one holding a mock weapon, the other with raised hands. She took a split second to process and fired only at the armed one. Her rifle clicked empty as it fell. She ducked behind a crate, swapping mags quickly, the metal-on-metal sound of the reload sharp in her ears. "Move, Vale." Cross's voice barked over the loudspeakers. She surged forward, rifle up. The final section of the kill house opened into a chaotic courtyard. Pop-up targets fired up and down in random patterns, and moving silhouettes darted across the rails like phantoms. She breathed deeply, raised her rifle, and went to work. Clang. 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 She pivoted, ducked, rose, and fired, her rifle barking in rapid succession. Smoke swirled, the simulated battlefield roaring in her ears, but her focus was razor-sharp. Every hostile that appeared fell within seconds. Every civilian remained untouched. The last target popped up unexpectedly, right at her flank. She swung hard, sight lined up in an instant, and fired. Clang. The buzzer screamed again, signaling the end of the drill. The speakers cut, leaving only the sound of her ragged breathing. The smoke slowly dissipated, revealing the full range of downed targets. Every hostile lay flat. Every civilian stood untouched. She lowered her rifle, heart pounding but steady. Cross stepped into the kill house, expression unreadable. He walked past each target, checking the placement of every shot. All clean hits, center mass or head. He finally stopped in front of her, meeting her eyes. "You didn't miss a single one," he said, voice low but carrying a note of something rare, approval. She said nothing, just tightened her grip on the rifle. "You're not too slow anymore," he said finally. "You're dangerous." The words sank in deeper than any praise she'd ever heard. But before she could even catch her breath, Cross gestured for the assistants to reset the entire course. Again, he said, his tone calm but firm. This time, we'll run it with live fire. Nadia's pulse quickened. Live fire. Real bullets. Real danger. She nodded once, without hesitation. Yes, Sergeant. The range fell silent except for the soft hiss of smoke machines resetting. Nadia stood in the middle of the makeshift kill house, chest heaving, the weight of her rifle pressing into her arms. The heat was oppressive now, sweat trickled down her spine beneath her vest. The words live fire still echoed in her head, but there was no fear, just a quiet readiness. She'd come too far to hesitate now. Cross stood at the edge of the training ground, his hands behind his back, watching her like a predator sizing up prey. We'll run it again, he said. This time, there won't be speakers blasting fake gunfire. There won't be flashing lights to make it theatrical. You're going to experience the real thing. Live rounds. Ricochets. The sound of bullets cracking past your head. The smoke, the confusion, it won't be for effect. It'll be survival. Yes, Sergeant, Nadia said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. He nodded to one of the range assistants. The man opened a metal case, revealing a box of live ammunition, and began methodically loading full magazines. Nadia stripped her own empty mags, exchanging them for the fresh ones, feeling their extra weight. There was no mistaking it now, this wasn't a simulation anymore. Listen carefully, Cross said as he walked toward her. His boots crunched over the gravel. You've already proven you can be fast and accurate. That's good. But this is where most people break. When you hear rounds snapping past your head, when you smell cordite in the air, when every instinct screams at you to duck and freeze, that's when your training matters most. You won't freeze, will you? No, Sergeant. He stared at her, unreadable. Good. Because out there, a fraction of a second of hesitation gets you killed. There's no safety net today. Understand that. I understand. Cross studied her for a moment longer, then gave a single, sharp nod. Move out. The buzzer blared. Nadia surged forward, rifle raised, and the battlefield came alive. This time, the air cracked and hissed with the sound of real bullets. As she sprinted toward the first barrier, dirt exploded near her boots from a ricochet, instinctively making her drop to a crouch. She forced herself to stay calm, to keep moving. A hostile target zipped into view. She fired, the recoil biting into her shoulder, the brass casing clinking off her vest as it ejected. The target dropped. She didn't linger, she swept her rifle to the left and fired again, dropping a second hostile before it even finished sliding into view. A live round zipped past her ear with a terrifying hiss. Her breath hitched, but she forced herself to keep advancing, pivoting behind a stack of crates for cover. She peeked out just enough to spot movement. Firing 2 controlled shots. Clang. Clang. The kill house was transformed. The smoke clung thickly to the ground, curling in waves that obscured everything beyond a few meters. The sharp smell of gunpowder stung her nose, and the deafening gunfire from the range staff's suppressive fire hammered her senses. It was chaos. But her mind was sharper than ever, her body reacting with the precision Cross had drilled into her. She vaulted over a barrier, weapon steady, and ducked low as more shots cracked overhead. Another target appeared, a civilian silhouette. She held her fire, pivoting quickly as a hostile zipped out from behind it. One clean shot and it fell. Her breathing was controlled, shallow, and her eyes scanned constantly, anticipating every possible threat. She could almost feel Cross watching her through the haze, testing not just her aim but her ability to remain composed in this storm of adrenaline. Halfway through the course, she dropped behind a burnt-out car frame to reload. The metallic click of the magazine seating home felt grounding, almost reassuring. She leaned out, firing 3 precise shots at 2 moving hostiles and a stationary sniper silhouette perched atop a crate stack. Clang. 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 More smoke. More fire. The course roared like a war zone now, and the live rounds tearing into steel around her made every decision matter. She crawled under a low barrier, then rolled into a crouch, rifle ready. A target popped up directly in her line of sight. She fired instinctively. Clean hit. Another target appeared farther back, moving unpredictably. She tracked it, waiting for her breath to align with her sights, and squeezed the trigger. Clang. She was in the zone again, that razor's edge between chaos and control. Every movement was smooth and deliberate, like she'd done this 1,000 times, though never with real bullets singing around her. The final stretch of the kill house opened into the courtyard, and Nadia braced herself. This was the hardest part of the drill earlier, and now it was even more dangerous. She darted forward, rifle tight against her shoulder. The courtyard erupted with movement as multiple targets sprang up at once, some swinging, some darting side to side. She dropped one, pivoted, dropped another, then dove behind a low wall as suppressive fire cracked past her head. She could feel the vibration of each shot against her cover. Push through. Cross's voice barked over the range speakers. She exploded from cover, rifle barking in short, precise bursts. One by one, the hostiles fell. Her senses were hyper-aware now, her body moving faster than her mind could process, yet every shot was deliberate. Clang. 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 Her rifle clicked empty again. She ducked into a crouch, reloading in under 2 seconds, then swung out to finish the last target at the far end. Clang. Silence. The buzzer blared, and the gunfire ceased. Smoke drifted lazily through the courtyard, curling around the downed silhouettes. Nadia stood in the center, rifle lowered, her breathing steady. She scanned instinctively, finger resting alongside the trigger guard, until Cross's voice finally cut through. Clear. She let out a slow breath, lowering her weapon fully. The realization hit her, she hadn't missed. Not a single hostile had remained standing, and every civilian silhouette was untouched. Cross appeared through the haze, walking slowly, his boots crunching over brass casings scattered across the range. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, respect. "You're done," he said simply. She straightened, trying not to let exhaustion show. "How'd I do, Sergeant?" Cross surveyed the scene. "You moved like a pro. No hesitation, no panic. That's not just training, that's instinct now. You're lethal." She felt a strange surge of pride at his words, though she kept her expression neutral. "Pack your gear," Cross continued. "You're ready for the next phase." "The next phase?" she asked, tightening her sling. Cross gave her a rare, almost imperceptible smirk. "You didn't think this was all for fun, did you? We don't put this much effort into someone who's just going to sit behind a desk." Her pulse quickened. "What's the next phase?" "You'll find out soon enough." He turned away, signaling for the instructors to reset the range, but his words lingered. This wasn't just training anymore. It was preparation for something real, something dangerous. Nadia felt a jolt of anticipation. She wasn't just proving herself now, she was being shaped for something bigger. As she stripped her rifle and reloaded her gear, the sound of the instructors resetting targets echoed across the range, but her mind was elsewhere. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was becoming a weapon. The range fell silent except for the soft hiss of smoke machines resetting. Nadia stood in the middle of the makeshift kill house, chest heaving, the weight of her rifle pressing into her arms. The heat was oppressive now, sweat trickled down her spine beneath her vest. The words "live fire" still echoed in her head, but there was no fear, just a quiet readiness. She'd come too far to hesitate now. Cross stood at the edge of the training ground, his hands behind his back, watching her like a predator sizing up prey. "We'll run it again," he said. "This time, there won't be speakers blasting fake gunfire. There won't be flashing lights to make it theatrical. You're going to experience the real thing. Live rounds. Ricochets. The sound of bullets cracking past your head. The smoke, the confusion, it won't be for effect. It'll be survival." "Yes, Sergeant," Nadia said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. He nodded to one of the range assistants. The man opened a metal case, revealing a box of live ammunition, and began methodically loading full magazines. Nadia stripped her own empty mags, exchanging them for the fresh ones, feeling their extra weight. There was no mistaking it now, this wasn't a simulation anymore. "Listen carefully," Cross said as he walked toward her. His boots crunched over the gravel. "You've already proven you can be fast and accurate. That's good. But this is where most people break. When you hear rounds snapping past your head, when you smell cordite in the air, when every instinct screams at you to duck and freeze, that's when your training matters most. You won't freeze, will you?" "No, Sergeant." He stared at her, unreadable. "Good. Because out there, a fraction of a second of hesitation gets you killed. There's no safety net today. Understand that?" "I understand." Cross studied her for a moment longer, then gave a single, sharp nod. "Move out." The buzzer blared. Nadia surged forward, rifle raised, and the battlefield came alive. This time, the air cracked and hissed with the sound of real bullets. As she sprinted toward the first barrier, dirt exploded near her boots from a ricochet, instinctively making her drop to a crouch. She forced herself to stay calm, to keep moving. A hostile target zipped into view. She fired, the recoil biting into her shoulder, the brass casing clinking off her vest as it ejected. The target dropped. She didn't linger, she swept her rifle to the left and fired again, dropping a second hostile before it even finished sliding into view. A live round zipped past her ear with a terrifying hiss. Her breath hitched, but she forced herself to keep advancing, pivoting behind a stack of crates for cover. She peeked out just enough to spot movement, firing 2 controlled shots. Clang. Clang. The kill house was transformed. The smoke clung thickly to the ground, curling in waves that obscured everything beyond a few meters. The sharp smell of gunpowder stung her nose, and the deafening gunfire from the range staff's suppressive fire hammered her senses. It was chaos. But her mind was sharper than ever, her body reacting with the precision Cross had drilled into her. She vaulted over a barrier, weapon steady, and ducked low as more shots cracked overhead. Another target appeared, a civilian silhouette. She held her fire, pivoting quickly as a hostile zipped out from behind it. One clean shot and it fell. Her breathing was controlled, shallow, and her eyes scanned constantly, anticipating every possible threat. She could almost feel Cross watching her through the haze, testing not just her aim but her ability to remain composed in this storm of adrenaline. Halfway through the course, she dropped behind a burnt-out car frame to reload. The metallic click of the magazine seating home felt grounding, almost reassuring. She leaned out, firing 3 precise shots at 2 moving hostiles and a stationary sniper silhouette perched atop a crate stack. Clang. 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 More smoke. More fire. The course roared like a war zone now, and the live rounds tearing into steel around her made every decision matter. She crawled under a low barrier, then rolled into a crouch, rifle ready. A target popped up directly in her line of sight. She fired instinctively. Clean hit. Another target appeared farther back, moving unpredictably. She tracked it, waiting for her breath to align with her sights, and squeezed the trigger. Clang. She was in the zone again, that razor's edge between chaos and control. Every movement was smooth and deliberate, like she'd done this 1,000 times, though never with real bullets singing around her. The final stretch of the kill house opened into the courtyard, and Nadia braced herself. This was the hardest part of the drill earlier, and now it was even more dangerous. She darted forward, rifle tight against her shoulder. The courtyard erupted with movement as multiple targets sprang up at once, some swinging, some darting side to side. She dropped one, pivoted, dropped another, then dove behind a low wall as suppressive fire cracked past her head. She could feel the vibration of each shot against her cover. Push through. Cross's voice barked over the range speakers. She exploded from cover, rifle barking in short, precise bursts. One by one, the hostiles fell. Her senses were hyper-aware now, her body moving faster than her mind could process, yet every shot was deliberate. Clang. 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 Her rifle clicked empty again. She ducked into a crouch, reloading in under 2 seconds, then swung out to finish the last target at the far end. Clang. Silence. The buzzer blared, and the gunfire ceased. Smoke drifted lazily through the courtyard, curling around the downed silhouettes. Nadia stood in the center, rifle lowered, her breathing steady. She scanned instinctively, finger resting alongside the trigger guard, until Cross's voice finally cut through. Clear. She let out a slow breath, lowering her weapon fully. The realization hit her, she hadn't missed. Not a single hostile had remained standing, and every civilian silhouette was untouched. Cross appeared through the haze, walking slowly, his boots crunching over brass casings scattered across the range. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, respect. "You're done," he said simply. She straightened, trying not to let exhaustion show. "How'd I do, Sergeant?" Cross surveyed the scene. "You moved like a pro. No hesitation, no panic. That's not just training, that's instinct now. You're lethal." She felt a strange surge of pride at his words, though she kept her expression neutral. "Pack your gear," Cross continued. "You're ready for the next phase." "The next phase?" she asked, tightening her sling. Cross gave her a rare, almost imperceptible smirk. "You didn't think this was all for fun, did you? We don't put this much effort into someone who's just going to sit behind a desk." Her pulse quickened. "What's the next phase?" "You'll find out soon enough." He turned away, signaling for the instructors to reset the range, but his words lingered. This wasn't just training anymore. It was preparation for something real, something dangerous. Nadia felt a jolt of anticipation. She wasn't just proving herself now, she was being shaped for something bigger. As she stripped her rifle and reloaded her gear, the sound of the instructors resetting targets echoed across the range, but her mind was elsewhere. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was becoming a weapon. The training ground was quiet again, but the silence didn't feel restful. It felt heavy, charged with something Nadia couldn't name. She sat on the edge of a metal bench near the range, cleaning her rifle with mechanical precision, the scent of gun oil filling her nose. Her body was sore from hours of drills, her muscles trembling slightly from fatigue, but she didn't let her hands falter. Cross had taught her that discipline wasn't just about hitting a target, it was about control in every movement, even when exhaustion gnawed at her bones. Good. Cross's voice came from behind her, calm and level as always. She didn't startle anymore when he appeared like that. You're getting faster with the breakdown. Nadia didn't look up, just nodded. Trying to shave off seconds, Sergeant. Seconds save lives, he said, stepping around to stand in front of her. His eyes studied her closely, like he was searching for cracks in her armor. You did well today. Better than I expected. The compliment, rare and genuine, made her pause for a fraction of a second, but she forced herself not to react. Thank you, Sergeant. Cross crouched, his voice low and even. Do you know why we've been pushing you harder than everyone else? Nadia's hands didn't stop moving as she reassembled the rifle. Because you see potential. Partly, Cross said, his gaze intense. But also because we need soldiers who can think when everything goes to hell. We need people who won't break when the plan falls apart, when the noise is deafening, when there's blood everywhere and no backup coming. That's what I'm looking for. She slid the bolt back into place, locked it, and set the rifle down carefully. And you think I'm one of those people? I know you are. The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. She'd always believed she was strong, capable, but hearing it from him, someone who'd been mauled by war, someone who saw through weakness like glass, meant more than she could admit. Then what's next? She asked quietly. Cross didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood in motion for her to follow. She grabbed her gear and trailed him across the dimly lit facility, past rooms filled with training equipment, through a narrow hallway lined with locked steel doors. They stopped at one, and Cross swiped a keycard. The door opened to reveal a stark room with nothing but a table, 2 chairs, and a thick binder placed neatly at the center. The walls were plain, painted a dull gray, and a single camera watched from the corner ceiling. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant. Sit, Cross said, taking the chair opposite her. She obeyed, setting her rifle aside. He slid the binder toward her. Open it. She flipped it open to the first page, her brows furrowing. It wasn't training schedules or tactical diagrams. It was a photograph. A grainy, high-resolution image of a man's face. He had sharp features, dark hair, and eyes that seemed to bore into the camera. Below the picture were details, a name, an alias, locations, habits. Classified markings covered the page. Nadia glanced up. Who is he? Cross leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. A man we've been tracking for a long time. He's smart, dangerous, and very well protected. We believe he's orchestrating operations that have cost countless lives. She turned the page. More photos. Weapons caches. Maps of compounds. Notes in red ink about possible movements. Why are you showing me this? Because this is where you're headed, Cross said simply. You're not training for some promotion or a ceremonial title. We're preparing you for field work. Real field work. Her chest tightened. She had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed made her pulse quicken. So this was never just about improving my shooting. No, he leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. You're being tested for a program most people don't even know exists. The drills, the pressure, the live fire simulations, they're designed to break people. You haven't broken yet. Nadia studied the binder again, flipping through the pages. The deeper she went, the more dangerous it looked. It wasn't just a manhunt, it was a network. Smuggling routes, coded messages, encrypted communication chains. You want me to help take him down? Cross gave a single nod. That's the mission. But this is more than shooting a target. You'll need to think, adapt, and act without hesitation. Which is why your training isn't over yet. She closed the binder slowly, her fingers resting on the worn cover. What else do you need to test? Cross's expression hardened. Your mind. Before she could respond, he stood and gestured toward the door. Follow me. They walked deeper into the facility, passing through another locked gate. The hallway opened into a darkened room lined with speakers and projectors. A single chair sat in the center, surrounded by flashing strobe lights and screens that blinked static images. "Sit," Cross ordered again. She obeyed, strapping herself in as he instructed. The restraints weren't tight, but they were enough to make her feel confined. "This is a mental conditioning drill," Cross explained, walking to a control panel. "We're going to push your senses to the limit. Noise, light, confusion. The goal is to simulate the chaos of a real battlefield, but without a weapon in your hand. All you'll have is your mind." Nadia nodded, steadying her breathing. "Focus on my voice," he said, flipping a switch. Instantly, the room exploded with noise. Gunfire, explosions, screams. The strobe lights flashed so violently that her vision blurred. Images appeared on the screens around her, faces, flashes of violence, distorted text. Her pulse spiked, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. Cross's voice cut through the chaos. "Tell me how many images of the target you've seen so far." She focused, scanning the screens as they flickered too fast to process. She spotted his face once. Twice. 2. "Good. Focus." The sounds grew louder. Sirens wailed. A voice screamed her name from somewhere in the chaos. She gritted her teeth and forced herself not to flinch. A third image appeared. 3. "Keep going." Her heart pounded in her ears, and sweat dripped down her temple. The flashes of light disoriented her, and the screams felt too real. For a second, she was back in the kill house, bullets snapping over her head. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to anchor to Cross's voice. 4, she muttered, spotting another image. Again. Her breathing quickened, but she scanned harder, forcing her mind to block out the chaos. There, another flash. 5. The noise stopped abruptly, the lights cutting out. The sudden silence was almost deafening. She sat there in the dark, her body trembling from the sensory overload. Cross walked over, unclipping the restraints. "Not bad." She stood slowly, her legs shaky but steady enough to keep her posture straight. "Most people lose count halfway through," Cross said, his voice low but approving. "You didn't. That's why you're here." Nadia wiped the sweat from her brow, steadying herself. "What's next?" Cross studied her for a moment, then said, "Sleep. You'll need it. Tomorrow, we test your endurance." She nodded, following him out of the room. But her mind wasn't resting. She could still see the man's face from the binder, burned into her memory. This wasn't just training anymore. She was already stepping into a war she didn't fully understand. The next morning, Nadia woke before the alarm, her body aching like it had been pounded with sledgehammers. Her arms and legs felt leaden, but she forced herself upright. Sleep had been shallow, broken by flashes of gunfire and the target's face haunting her dreams. She swung her legs off the cot and stood, forcing her mind to clear. She knew instinctively that today wasn't going to be easier, it was going to be worse. Cross was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable as always. He handed her a protein bar and a small bottle of water. "Eat fast," he said. "We start in 5." She tore into the wrapper and devoured the bar, her stomach churning but grateful for the calories. Cross led her outside to a training field drenched in morning fog. The air was sharp and cool, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. Rows of tires, sandbags, and wooden walls stretched across the dirt field, forming a brutal obstacle course. There was no one else around, no spectators, no other trainees. Just her and Cross. "Drop your gear," Cross ordered. She shrugged off her jacket and vest, standing in just a sweat-soaked training shirt and fatigues. "Today is endurance," Cross said. "This is where most people quit. You won't." She squared her shoulders. "No, Sergeant." His lips curled into the faintest ghost of a smirk. "Let's see." He blew a whistle, and she took off running. The first sprint was through tires lined in 3 uneven rows. She moved quickly, her feet landing hard, her breath steady. She'd done courses like this before, but not like this, not with Cross shouting commands in her ear, not with the oppressive weight of expectation pressing on her chest. "Faster," he barked. "You think your enemies will wait for you to catch your breath." She pushed harder, her heart pounding, lungs burning as she sprinted toward the sandbags. She dropped to the ground and crawled beneath low-hanging wires stretched inches above the dirt. Mud and grit smeared her arms and face, but she didn't stop. Cross's voice followed her like a shadow. "Keep your head down. Lower." She obeyed, gritting her teeth as the wire scraped her back. Her elbows burned from the rough ground, but she made it through and scrambled up the first wooden wall. She grabbed the edge, muscles screaming as she pulled herself over, landing hard on the other side. Again, Cross said flatly. She turned back and scaled it again, every movement slower than the last. Again. By the third time, her arms shook violently, but she refused to let herself fail. She got over the wall and dropped down, stumbling but staying upright. Cross watched her with hawk-like precision, saying nothing. "Run to the tower," he ordered finally, pointing to a tall wooden structure at the far end of the course. She sprinted, her breaths